Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and the show is bananas today. Okay, we're gonna talk about Hunter Biden's plea deal falling apart. It happened in real time. I'll explain exactly what took place in the courtroom and why the federal judge overseeing that case decided against accepting his plea deal. Later, we'll also discuss a pretty big story having to do with Rudy Giuliani confessing to lies about the 2020 presidential election and how it was allegedly stolen from Donald Trump. We'll give you the details on that as well. In the second hour of the show, John Iadarola will be joining me to talk about, yes, some serious stories, but also we're gonna lighten things up. We're gonna ask you a question. How much are you willing to pay for literally a brick wall? It's a comment on how disastrous our housing crisis is in America. Don't miss that. And Lizzo does something incredible. I was skeptical of this story until I watched the video for myself, but she did something that honestly brought me to tears, and I can't wait to share that with you in the second hour of the show. But before we get to all of that, as always, I just want to encourage you to like and share the stream if you're watching us live. It's the easiest way to help support the show and get the TYT message out there. You can also support us and get exclusive members only content by becoming a member by going to tyt.com/join, or you can just click on that join button if you're watching us on YouTube. Now, I wanted to start off with something that isn't necessarily a breaking news story or even a headline news story. It does have something to do with a CNN video that went viral yesterday, but there's a broader point to make here, so let's get into it. Let's talk about organized retail theft.
You've seen the videos of brazen smash and grabs like these, often carried out in broad daylight.
It's an absolute threat.
A Chicago area Louis Vuitton raided by 14 hooded suspects, making off with over $100,000 worth of luxury items. A flash mob style heist at an Oakland area Nordstrom. This New York jewelry store, windows smashed in with hammers. Federal authorities and retailers are now sounding the alarm about the growing danger of organized retail crime that is sweeping the country.
For a while now, I've been attempting to slowly ease the political left into admitting and responding to the undeniable truth on the ground in major US cities. Organized retail theft is harming many communities, and we need to be real about it. For one, I don't find it politically advantageous to deny what everyone can witness for themselves. But more importantly, the left loses credibility when its prominent voices claim they want to build a better society for ordinary people while actively making unmerited justifications for crap that actually makes life worse. A prime example of the madness is San Francisco, where organized retail theft has gotten so bad that half the stores in its downtown area have shuttered. A recent CNN report revealed San Francisco's dysfunction with a local Walgreens hit with 3 thefts in just 30 minutes.
Our Kyung Law visited one Walgreens that's hit by shoplifters more than a dozen times a day. It happened 3 times while she was inside.
In the 30 minutes we were at this Walgreens, we watched 3 people, including this man, steal.
Did that guy pay? Did that guy pay? He didn't pay.
Now that store has been dubbed the most robbed Walgreens in the country. And I'm sure local political leaders must be super proud to foster the kind of environment necessary to win that honor. I'll get to more on that in just a minute. But first, I want to get to the cover story that the left has fully bought into, that these thieves are desperate, that they're living in poverty and have no choice but to steal because they need to feed their families. Now, first off, the assumption that crimes must be committed by the poor is, pretty damn defamatory toward disadvantaged individuals. Secondly, that claim is, without merit. But let's compare economic rough patches and how they impacted crime. Let's look at the data. Take a look at this pretty incredible chart using data from the John Jay College of Criminal Justice on crimes committed in New York City between 2006 and 2022. Now you'll notice that there isn't a notable spike in major commercial retail crimes during or immediately after the 2008 economic collapse. In other words, the economic desperation that Americans were experiencing during the last Great Recession did not translate to a significant uptick in retail crime. But the data on this chart makes clear that there was a massive spike in retail crime during the COVID pandemic. And perhaps, just perhaps, factors other than poverty and desperation account for it. Now look, to be fair, the one man that we saw in the earlier CNN video could potentially fall into the category of a lone thief who stole a little something because he was hungry. I don't know, but I'm not really interested in petty crimes. The real problem is the ongoing and unmitigated organized crime that we're all paying the price for. The issue has now become so out of control that the federal government is getting involved. Federal authorities now warn it's become an absolute threat to public safety and public health, declaring that violent gangs, dangerous international crime syndicates, and even groups with suspected ties to terrorism are increasingly dabbling in organized retail crime across the United States. Here's more on that.
In April, 3 people were arrested in connection with an organized retail crime operation that allegedly targeted California Home Depots. Authorities recovering $75,000 worth of stolen goods. And Homeland Security officials say the organizations have suspected ties to drug trafficking and terrorism financing.
They're crime syndicates that could be tied to local gang networks that maybe have established networks either from the Chilean or Colombian threats or Romanian crews coming in from Eastern European that are comfortable in certain cities.
According to the company, this one crew robbed various stores more than 20 times, allegedly stealing a total of $135,000 in merchandise.
Now, Homeland Security officials are also concerned about other groups, including the Aryan Brotherhood and crime rings from Eastern Europe and South America, using organized retail theft to raise funds for their criminal organizations. Raul Aguilar, who serves or oversees international organized crime cases for Homeland Security, says there are definitely ties between certain organized retail thieves and drug trafficking organizations, including some of the cartels identified by the United States government as a global threat. In addition, Aguilar also says that some of these networks are tied to the terrorist financing networks around the world. Now, a lot of these thieves are repeat offenders who are emboldened enough to casually steal in broad daylight.
Another alleged repeat offender, this Delaware woman, Ayanna Duramis, who authorities say has been on an organized retail crime spree for years. In February, she was caught on surveillance, allegedly stealing 2 Nespresso machines worth nearly $2,000 from a New Jersey Bed Bath & Beyond. And then here she is again at a nearby Home Depot a week later, raising a hammer at a Home Depot employee who tried to stop her.
Now, all of this criminal activity comes at a cost to all of us. Some of us, the most economically vulnerable, pay a bigger price. For instance, a Homeland Security investigations report issued last year said estimates regarding organized retail crime found the average American family will pay more than $500 annually in additional costs due to the impact. That's not a small amount of money for the nearly half of American households who reported that they could not afford a $400 emergency. And that was data from the Federal Reserve prior to the pandemic and prior to the inflation driving up living costs even more today. Since stores are closing in response to the uptick in organized retail theft, workers are losing their jobs. Walgreens alone has shut down 5 stores in San Francisco due to theft since the retail crime epidemic began. Now, keep in mind that those on a fixed income now have to spend more of their resources to travel even further in order to purchase groceries and other household needs. But those added financial costs we all have to pay to accommodate organized criminals is nothing compared to what some retail workers are dealing with as they try to earn an honest living.
Coordinated groups are targeting stores, millions of dollars worth of goods. Retailers say they're growing more violent, putting shoppers and workers at risk, sometimes with tragic consequences.
What goes through your mind when you realize that your dad was essentially killed over 3 power washers?
You can't imagine that any piece of equipment in Home Depot is worth a life.
When you saw the video of what happened to your dad, what was going through your mind?
Wish it would have been me.
That worker was 82-year-old Gary Razor, a retiree working at the Home Depot in Hillsborough, North Carolina. He sadly died after being shoved to the ground by an alleged thief who was then arrested, luckily, on a murder charge. The case against him is still pending. Now, there are other examples, like the following. At a Home Depot in Pleasanton, California in April, Blake Mose, a 26-year-old employee set to be married in August, was fatally shot after he tried to stop a suspected thief. 2 people have been arrested on murder charges in that case. Now, these 2 victims aren't even a fraction of the other countless workers who have been assaulted as these thefts take place. Now, if you're LARPing as a socialist who pretends to value labor, maybe your act would be more believable if you showed just an ounce of concern for the workers. But I don't know, that must be a bourgeois concern of mine. So what now? What are the possible solutions? The National Retail Federation wants the federal government to enforce more regulations toward online sellers like Amazon, eBay, Craigslist, and Facebook Marketplace. These are places where the thieves sell the stolen goods, to which the federal government has taken some action on. For instance, the newly passed INFORM Act now requires online retailers to verify certain information about their vendors and sellers in order to combat the sale of stolen goods. Online marketplaces that do not comply with this law could face more than $50,000 in fines for each violation. But retailers argue that this is not enough and would like Congress to allocate funds for a federal task force targeting organized retail crime. I'm not really sure if that's necessary. There are other proposals, though, in Congress as well. The Combating Organized Retail Crime Act, which would establish a coordinated multi-agency response and create new tools to tackle evolving trends in organized retail theft, was introduced by the House of Representatives in February. We'll see if that legislation goes anywhere. Now, on a more local level, there are about a dozen state task forces investigating the issue. Homeland Security investigators say they're assisting in those efforts. And over the past 3 years, the agency has tripled the number of cases it's investigating, often using fraud-related and money laundering laws to open cases. But let's keep it real. Lax state laws need to be revisited. Evidence suggests that there is a small group of people committing these crimes over and over again. They should not get to take advantage of bail reform if they're recommitting the exact same crime. A perfect example of this is highlighted in New York City. Nearly a third of all shoplifting arrests in New York City last year involved just 327 people. Collectively, they were arrested and rearrested more than 6,000 times. In other words, there are solutions that can, focus on solving this problem without reverting back to mass incarceration. In fact, we should maybe consider these solutions if we want to avoid going back to the old model. But look, I also want to address something broader. This data I've shared with you, along with the current crime-related trends that I've brought up multiple times on the show, has rubbed other left-wing shows the wrong way. In their view, stories like these serve as an obstacle to some of the proposals on the left that, quite frankly, I disagree with. I've never supported police or prison abolition, and I've yet to hear a convincing argument in favor of these policies. I have, however, supported the Nordic model for criminal justice and continue to do so. Over the past month, 2 different people on the left, one publicly and one privately, urged me to avoid focusing on stories like organized retail theft. While the information I'm sharing is accurate, it allegedly hurts the left to share it. I want to be clear that while I agree with many left-wing policies, I'm not an activist and I'm certainly not a propagandist. My responsibility is to be truthful to my audience and to share nuances of all the complex issues we discuss every day. Accuracy, fairness, and nuance is what I want to do. And if I wanted to be a propagandist, I sure as hell wouldn't be doing it for the salary I'm currently making. We're gonna take a break. I'll be right back. What's up, everyone? Welcome to our first social break of the show. We've got Repek, the political cat boy, looking particularly fab today, Anna. Thank you. Don't shoot, I'm the goalkeeper. Speaks to my heart here. Yeah, poor desperate people aren't stealing from freaking Louis Vuitton stores. 1000%. Like the fact that the data is right in front of you. The information is right in front of you. The fact that there's so much evidence pointing to organized crime, and yet you still hear like this chorus of people arguing like, no, this is because people are desperate. This is because people are living in poverty and they have no choice but to steal in order to feed their family. These are not the people who are doing the bulk of the crimes that we're seeing in these stores. They're not. So please stop defaming them. Just because someone's living in poverty doesn't mean that it increases the chances of them committing crimes. Anyway, let's move on. Let's go to our Twitch hype chat comments. We've got Late Bloomer 66 who says, Chat, Sinead O'Connor died today at the age of 56. Rest in paradise, beautiful woman. I did see that story right before I came into work today. Thank you for sharing it with our audience, even though it's tragic. Also, special thanks to our new YouTube members. We have Chris Birch, who gifted 5 memberships. We also have Screet Hart, RIP Sinead O'Connor. Chase and the Dragon says, I'm really glad to hear Anna's legitimate critiques with actual data. I appreciate that, and I appreciate that you enjoyed it. Michael Gonzalez says, employees shouldn't have to risk their personal safety because of crime in their stores. Could not agree more. Minutes Dragon says, don't be a hero for a corporation that doesn't care about you. Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, I don't think the workers should try to prevent the thieves from thieving. But the other thing that I don't, look, I feel bad for the workers on so many different levels, because if they shouldn't intervene because that puts their safety in jeopardy. In fact, they're discouraged from intervening because the employer doesn't want to face any liability issues if the employee gets harmed while trying to stop a thief, right? But at the same time, with all of these stores closing, I can understand how demoralizing it is for these workers to get hit by these thieves day in and day out, knowing that there are a lot of stores that are shutting down. They could lose their jobs. So it's to treat this as if it's like a victimless issue is so infuriating when it is not a victimless issue. People are losing their jobs, stores are shutting down. In some cases, workers are getting assaulted. In some cases, they're getting killed. It's just awful all around. It really is. Stinky Feet says, I think most of these should be called group crime instead of organized. What I see doesn't look very organized at all, just a frenzied smash and grab. Yeah, I mean, look, the reason why it's called organized is because the resources go to those at the top who are organizing the crime to begin with. Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm Anna Kasparian. Let's talk a little bit about investigations having to do with prominent politicians or political figures, those associated with political figures. Let's get started with Rudy Giuliani. When former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani claimed that 2 Georgia elections officials had rigged the 2020 presidential election, he was lying. Now, we all know he was lying, but has he ever admitted to it? Turns out today he did. According to new reporting, Rudy Giuliani confessed to his lies in an overnight court filing in response to a defamation lawsuit filed in federal court by Georgia election workers. So Rudy Freeman and her daughter, Wandrea Shea Moss, are the 2 individuals who have filed the defamation lawsuit against Rudy Giuliani, and in his filing, he confessed to lying about them. Now, what was his lie? Well, he claimed that these 2 women essentially rigged the election after they pulled thousands of fraudulent ballots from a suitcase in their vote counting station and illegally fed them through voting machines. That was the claim by Rudy Giuliani. That claim was repeated by Donald Trump. And these women's lives were destroyed as a result of that. They had to deal with all sorts of threats, all sorts of crazy people coming after them. And so let's back up a little bit, give you more context before we get to the Giuliani confession here. Now, the suit accused Giuliani, the defamation lawsuit, and others of promoting a video that purported to show Freeman and Moss, those are the 2 election workers, a mother and daughter, of manipulating ballots while working at the State Farm Arena for the Fulton County Board of Elections. Now, last year, Freeman and Moss appeared as witnesses at a public hearing of the House Select Committee investigating January 6th, and they told their story of the lies told about them and what that led to in their personal lives. In fact, why don't we go to Moss testifying in front of this committee just last year and hear what she had to go through.
Those horrible things, did they include threats?
Yes, a lot of threats, wishing death upon me, telling me that I'll be in jail with my mother, and saying things like, "Be glad it's 2020 and not 1920."
Were a lot of these threats and vile comments racist in nature?
A lot of them were racist. A lot of them were just hateful. But yes, sir.
Now, none of that is surprising. It shouldn't be surprising to you because it wasn't just Giuliani spreading these lies about these women. You also had Donald Trump spreading these lies about these women, making them a target for the Trump supporters who unfortunately genuinely believed the lies, genuinely believed that the election was stolen from Trump. So Trump invoked Freeman's name 18 times during a phone call with Brad Raffensperger. That was the Georgia Secretary of State on January 2nd, 2021. In that call, Trump, of course, asked Raffensperger to help him find 11,800 votes, which would be enough to swing the results in Georgia away from Biden. In fact, we've played that video for you all multiple times. I'm gonna go ahead and play it again.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
So that was pretty clear. Now let's fast forward to the filing by Rudy Giuliani, which of course happened overnight. What was the admission here? Well, in the 2-page declaration, according to the New York Times, Giuliani acknowledged that he had in fact made these statements about Freeman and Moss that led to the filing of the suit, and that the remarks carry meaning that is defamatory per se. He also admitted that his statements were actionable and false, and that he no longer disputed the factual elements of liability the election workers had raised in their suit. But there is a catch, because while he admitted guilt here, Giuliani wants to be cleared of any damages or having to pay any damages. Giuliani, insisting that he still had legal defenses in the case, said that he continued to believe his accusations about Freeman and Moss were constitutionally protected under the First Amendment. He also refused to acknowledge that his statements had caused the women any damage, a key element required to collect a judgment in a defamation case. So his argument here is, no, I was just sharing my opinion, just my opinion, man. And by the way, opinion is protected by the First Amendment, but you cannot declare something that is false about someone that could lead to their reputation being destroyed, that could lead to damages in their life, whether it's financial damages or otherwise. And that is what he did repeatedly. So we'll see how this plays out. But I just love how he's like, yeah, I lied about them, but I shouldn't have to face any consequences, because even though I declared they did something that I didn't have any evidence for and they didn't actually do, and even though their lives were screwed over as a result of my lies, I don't want to have to pay any damages for it. That's really what this filing is about. Now, I'm gonna pause and just mention that there are how many people now who participated in the riots on January 6th, who were prosecuted as a result of that. Many were convicted and sentenced to prison time as a result of that. And what spurred January 6th were the lies that were told by Donald Trump and all the people surrounding him. The Trump campaign continued repeating the lies. Some right-wing media outlets, including Fox, repeated the lies. And this, of course, led to consequences for those who participated in the riots. And I gotta say, it's kind of nice to see that some of the Trump officials, Trump campaign officials, are willing to confess to the lies. And I hope that they suffer consequences for it, because it's not right that ordinary people were lied to. It's not right that they engaged in that riot. I'm not justifying that at all. But the lies coming from the very top on the election, the 2020 election, is what persuaded them to allegedly take our democracy back, allegedly fight to hand the election over to the rightful winner. Those people were misled and they suffered the consequences of that. I think Rudy Giuliani and all the other goons in Trump's campaign should also suffer the consequences for spreading the lies in the first place. Now, to continue, it appeared that the reason why Giuliani was finally compelled to confess that he lied about these women is because the case wasn't going so well for him to begin with. He was not cooperating with the discovery process, for instance. In the declaration, he acknowledged making his concessions to avoid unnecessary expenses in litigating what he believes to be unnecessary disputes. Now, those two election officials who are at the heart of this defamation lawsuit against Rudy Giuliani had previously sued others who had defamed them. Now, the two women had originally sued other defendants, including One America News Network, which certainly spread some election-related lies. But ultimately, they settled the case with everyone except Rudy Giuliani. They wanted to move forward with that. And for Giuliani, this is just one of many defamation lawsuits. 3 weeks ago, a legal ethics committee in Washington said he should be disbarred for his unparalleled attempts to help Trump overturn the 2020 election. I can't believe that that just happened 3 weeks ago. Why did it take so long to, maybe consider disbarring this man? And Shea and Moss are now celebrating Giuliani's admission. Their attorney released a statement saying that Giuliani's stipulation concedes what we have always known to be true. Ruby Freeman and Shea Moss honorably performed their civic duties in the 2020 presidential election in full compliance with the law. And the allegations of election fraud he and former President Trump made against them have been false since day one. While certain issues, the attorney continues, including damages, remain to be decided by the court, our clients are pleased with this major milestone in their fight for justice and look forward to presenting what remains of this case at trial. And I really do hope that they move forward with this case. And I hope that they are paid the damages they deserve, considering how badly they were defamed by Rudy Giuliani and others in the Trump campaign. Now, there was another case worth discussing, and this one has to do with the opposite end of the political spectrum. Let's talk a little bit about Hunter Biden.
Hunter Biden, the son of President Joe Biden, came to court this morning expecting to plead guilty to 2 misdemeanor tax charges and was planning to enter into a pretrial diversion agreement on a felony gun possession charge. But in the end, there was no deal. It all collapsed. The judge presiding over the matter said this case needed more information before the judge would accept this proposed agreement.
Hunter Biden is having a no good day, very, very bad day, just a tough go at things. Now, Hunter Biden was planning on taking a plea deal with the Justice Department today, but the deal was derailed by kind of Republicans, although that's not really all that true. And he ultimately ended up attempting to plead not guilty, but the judge wasn't even ready to accept the revised plea. Now, the story is a little complicated. I'm gonna try to walk you through it, but ultimately it's important to know that there was an investigation into Hunter Biden, and there's definitely some wrongdoing as it pertains to an illegal gun possession and his unwillingness to pay taxes in time, and he does suffer consequences for that. So, the Trump-era Justice Department apparently started investigating Hunter Biden back in 2018. Clearly, this was when Donald Trump was still president of the United States. It was his Justice Department who launched this investigation, and it expanded to examine multiple potential issues related to Hunter Biden's behavior, including allegations that he violated money laundering and foreign lobbying laws with his multi-million-dollar overseas business dealings. Now, through that investigation so far, the only thing that has been proven, the only thing that we have evidence of is how he didn't pay his taxes, okay? And there are other issues, including illegal possession of firearms. So in outlining the charges, the special prosecutor in this case, the attorney investigating this, and that's Weiss's office, said in an earlier statement that Hunter Biden received taxable income in excess of $1.5 million annually in calendar years 2017 and 2018, despite owing in excess of $100,000 in federal income taxes each year. He did not pay the income tax due for either year. That's just a long-winded way of saying he didn't pay his taxes. That is what the investigation found. And as a result, he was prosecuted for that. So that's the heart of the criminal prosecution, but there's also a gun charge. So let's talk a little bit about that. Biden faced a separate gun charge for illegally owning a Colt Cobra 38 special handgun. Now, the Justice Department, however, said that he had reached a pretrial agreement. Pay attention here because this is the relevant part. He had reached a pretrial agreement that most likely means that under certain conditions, the case may be wiped from his record. So that was part of the plea deal, right? Plead guilty to the tax-related charges and the gun charge can go away. Although there seemed to be a little bit of miscommunication on that, a little bit of misunderstanding. Now, the original plea deal included that prosecutors would recommend probation for the tax violations, while a separate felony gun charge would be dropped if Biden met certain conditions laid out in court. Thus, the plea deal that enraged the GOP. This is where the Republicans come in. Let's hear what they have to say.
The federal judge, Mary Ellen Noreika, has told the court that she is deferring a decision on the plea agreement for the president's son. She said she cannot accept or reject it. She's asked the parties for additional information. She told them at one point, quote, "You are telling me just to rubber stamp this deal that is form over substance." She had serious concerns not only about the agreement on misdemeanor tax charges, but also on this diversion program for the felony gun offense. She said she believed there may be elements and provisions within that agreement that are unconstitutional in her view.
Now, Noreika, the judge in this case, was appointed by Donald Trump. And so there are all sorts of accusations that the decision here might be politically motivated. Listen, I don't think that that is fair to say here, because while the judge made clear that she's unwilling to accept a plea agreement because she is concerned about the constitutionality of that plea agreement. There are other judges that have been appointed by Democrats who oversee cases pertaining to Republican wrongdoing. I think that it's unsavory, to say the least, to immediately brush off a judge's decision due to who they were appointed by. And even though for the time being she has rejected this plea deal, she is giving the Hunter Biden's team and the prosecutors here 14 days to make their case about the constitutionality of this plea agreement before moving forward. So she hasn't flat out rejected it. She hasn't rejected it, but she hasn't accepted it either. She is waiting for more information from both parties in order to make a decision as to whether or not this plea agreement is constitutional. Now, I do want to also just quickly talk about some of the other accusations from the Republican Party here. And in order to understand that, we need to go to the next video. So let's take a look at that.
Now, before all this happened, Republicans had blasted this potential deal as merely a slap on the wrist and had accused the Department of Justice of interfering in this investigation. Meanwhile, two IRS whistleblowers also accused the Department of Justice of slow-walking parts of this investigation. U.S. Attorney Weiss, who we should note was nominated by then President Donald Trump in 2017, has denied allegations of political interference.
So that is what the Republican Party has been alleging about this case. They are alleging that the Biden administration has meddled in the Hunter Biden prosecution, even though they have failed to provide any evidence of that. In fact, let's talk a little bit about US Attorney David Weiss, who has been overseeing this investigation since 2018. We're talking about an individual who was appointed by the Trump administration to launch this investigation into Hunter Biden. Trump did that. Trump chose this guy. And so what happened after President Biden got elected and maybe had some say in how this prosecution moved forward? Well, let's go to graphic 4 here. US Attorney David Weiss has led the investigation. He was appointed by Trump, and Joe Biden kept him at his post so he could continue handling the probe. There is no public indication that Joe Biden or the White House ever tried to intervene in the probe. Now look, there could be future evidence that counters that, and I'm open to that evidence. We just have not seen it yet. And if people are uncomfortable with the idea that the son of the president of the United States might get some special treatment in that he might be granted a plea deal that allows him to skirt having to serve any time behind bars, I hear you. But I would just ask, especially to my friends on the other side of the political aisle, if you're gonna make that case, how are you then gonna turn around and argue that Donald Trump, who is on tape admitting to taking classified documents from the White House to his home in Mar-a-Lago, how are you gonna argue that that guy shouldn't face any consequences for it? How are you gonna turn around and argue that the FBI should be defunded because of this classified documents investigation into Donald Trump? You can't claim that you want to hold those in positions of power accountable when it impacts Democrats, and then turn around and say you do not want to do the same thing when it impacts someone on your side of the aisle. See, for me, you commit the crime, you should do the time. You should suffer the consequences. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, progressive, socialist, I don't care. I think that the two-tier justice system is sick. And I, for one, am tired of watching elite individuals break the law over and over again without suffering the same consequences that ordinary people suffer from. So again, if you're concerned about Hunter Biden getting let off easy and you identify as a Republican, just give me a little bit of consistency here and stop making excuses and stop providing cover for the criminality on your side of the aisle. Now, I'll continue. So I want to give you some more statements from the judge here because Judge Mary Ellen Norica said that she had concerns about the parties seemingly linking the tax plea agreement to resolving a felony gun charge. During the proceedings, prosecutors confirmed that the investigation into Biden was in fact ongoing. And she asks, what if it is unconstitutional, meaning the plea deal? I'm trying to exercise due diligence and consideration to make sure we don't make a misstep. And so as a result, the judge has given, again, both parties 14 days to provide additional information to help her decide whether or not she should accept that plea deal. We'll see how it plays out. Now, according to reporters who were there on the scene as this all played out in real time, Hunter Biden looked frustrated, frazzled, almost irritated by how all this played out. But he committed crimes here. And if ordinary people decided, you know what, I made millions of dollars, I'm just not gonna pay taxes, and I'm gonna be in possession of an illegal weapon, they're not going to get any special treatment at all. Now, I don't know if Biden's gonna get special treatment. I don't know what the outcome of this is going to be. But again, I just wanna reiterate, don't care if it's the son of the president. Don't care if he's someone who shares my political values and beliefs, although I doubt it. All I care about is making sure that we're consistent with our criminal justice system, that we're consistent in prosecuting people regardless of what their socioeconomic status is or regardless of how connected they are. That includes Democrats and Republicans. Because if we're going to have trust in our institutions, if we're gonna have trust in how punishment or consequences are doled out to individuals, we need to see that consistency, and we can't allow our political ideology to get in the way of whether or not we believe someone should suffer the consequences for their actions. All right, I gotta take a break. When we come back, we're going to discuss the water wars. Remember how the Biden administration, with the help of Congress, of course, allocated a ton of money toward improving our infrastructure, including, our drinking water, our tap water. Well, the earmark process It's kind of taking some of those resources away from disadvantaged parts of the country and pouring it into wealthier parts of the country. I want to give you the details on that and more when we come back. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to our social break. Chris Birch writes in and says, Anna, please tell me you got your birthday present. If not, I will email staff and make sure it didn't get thrown away. I haven't actually, and I did receive some mail today from viewers, and unfortunately, your gift was not included. I'm really, really sorry to say that. But yes, you should definitely email staff because I don't want you to pay for something that I did not receive. But thank you, it's the thought that counts, and I really, really appreciate you. And I love your last name. We've got Frank Rockefeller who says, democracy is lawless government, coherent criminality is lawless society. We've got a half critical comment from Aaron Talks Culture. Doing the story on shoplifting is justified. Framing the story as being in opposition to other progressives, however, is continuing the circular firing squad the online left seems to love. I'm reporting a story about the reality. So let's see what the reaction to that story is gonna be. Okay, let's just see. And then you tell me who's in the wrong and who's in the right. Because God forbid I report these stories or share this data with my audience without other left-wing hosts mischaracterizing what my intentions are or the report itself. But let's wait and see. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, they've proven me right every single time. We'll see how it plays out this time. We've got, thank you to Love, Truth, and Freedom. This is a stick up says, can Republicans stop stalking Hunter Biden? Nobody cares, he's not elected to any office. I mean, they're really like, they're digging and digging, stretching, just trying to find anything with Hunter Biden. You're right, most people don't care. And I don't know if they're doing themselves any favors by being hyper-focused on Hunter Biden, but I can't dissuade them, they're gonna keep doing this. All right, Kat Givens says, Anna, why are you saying we don't care? Organized retail theft can be dealt with through RICO Act or other conspiracy laws. Workers need more security. Dump on the owners, not us, what the hell? No, I'm not dumping on most progressives, but I am dumping on the people who want to pretend like this isn't happening, or if they acknowledge that it's happening internally, privately, they tell me not to talk about it because it doesn't make the left look good. That is what's happening. I mean, that is where the whole, oh, Anna's a right-winger now narrative comes from. Because being concerned about organized retail theft that's hurting ordinary people somehow makes you a right-winger. And for the leftists who keep spewing that nonsense, great job doing positive PR for the right wing. Because let me tell you something, ordinary people are sick of this crap. But anyway, I mean, if you're sitting in your well air-conditioned room and you're making money off of your Twitch stream all day, spreading lies about what's really happening on the ground, it's really easy to be disconnected from reality. So yeah, I've got some fighting words today. I can't help it. But anyway, for now, let's get back to the show. I just want to say thanks to some of our live viewers, including Independent Conversation Show, who says, Anna, don't ever back down. And if you have people on the left telling you not to cover anything, you still cover those stories to show them what real journalists do. Thank you for that message. And Nicolette shares a personal story. My in-laws own a repair shop. They have been robbed on a near nightly basis. Cops who caught them didn't even book them, assuming they even showed up. This resulted in them pulling a gun on a robber just last week. Yeah, look, there's definitely issues with policing as well. But if you're in a part of the country where certain crimes aren't getting prosecuted, cops just decide, well, what's the point in putting my life in danger and trying to arrest these people? I mean, a lot of that's going on as well. But anyway, thank you for sharing your personal stories with me and your comments. For now, let's move on to something completely different. The ongoing water wars, very, very serious problem here in the United States, especially as it pertains to our water-related infrastructure and how some communities are getting taken care of while others are being neglected. We're now learning that states are getting screwed by members of Congress who have redirected a whopping $2.3 billion in federal funds meant to address clean water needs toward politically advantageous pet projects over the past 2 years. Now, in many cases, these lawmakers cut into money that could have been made available to poorer, needier, and oftentimes minority communities. So let's get into the details here. As a result of these diversions, 38 states and territories have been shortchanged about $660 million in federal water aid. And that's according to data obtained and analyzed by the Washington Post, illustrating how the system often has rewarded politically well-connected lawmakers in some of the wealthiest areas nationwide. So let's back up a second, because this is a part of how government works that some people might not be fully aware of. And it gives you a sense of what the interpersonal, or what explains some of the interpersonal dynamics between members of Congress, why they behave the way they do. When you have a bill like, let's say, Biden's infrastructure bill, which of course allocates a chunk of money towards certain projects. In this case, and what we're talking about right now, we're discussing infrastructure as it pertains to, water, ensuring that we have clean, safe water for communities all across the country. We've had issues with our water infrastructure for quite some time now. That money isn't just simply evenly distributed across all states, not even close. Members of Congress compete with one another in order to get their pet projects in their districts funded through the money that was allocated through that legislation. And what ends up happening is certain communities, by the very nature of this process, get screwed and end up with little to no resources. Okay, so unfortunately the problem is expected to worsen in the coming fiscal year as House Republicans look to cut $1.7 billion to the overall funding that Washington sends to states for their water needs. They want to slash federal water spending by more than half. I mean, think about how insane that is. At a time when, again, we're dealing with crumbling infrastructure, we're dealing with cities that have unsafe drinking water. Flint is still riddled with unsafe drinking water as we speak. But no, you've got an entire political party that is eyeing additional cuts to infrastructure and basically replacing lead pipes and things like that. So how does the redirection of these funds work exactly? So every year Congress appropriates money for 2 federal water funds that are overseen by the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. And then they end up distributing the grants to various states. Since 2022, the federal allocation has totaled roughly $5.5 billion, amounting to a literal and figurative drop in the bucket for a nation with an estimated $625 billion backlog in projects just to provide cleaner, reliable drinking water. And lawmakers can reserve federal water aid for specific projects in their home communities using a legislative tool known as earmarks. Now, earmarks serve as legislative sweeteners to essentially incentivize lawmakers to pass major bills by allowing them to steer federal money, federal resources to projects in their districts. Only after earmarks are decided does Washington divvy up and distribute a smaller pool of the remaining money among these states. That's how it works. So in some cases, the result is that the system is a net cut in funding. Really depends on which state you're in, which part of the country you're in. So let's take a look at this graph that the Washington Post put together, and it addresses how each passing year, Democrats and Republicans have redirected an increasing amount of water spending to their own preferred projects, cutting into the money that states could use as they see fit. So you see that every passing year, the amount of money that goes toward earmarks seems to increase. So we're not even in 2024 yet, but obviously this addresses some of the future funding, some of the future allocations. And already for 2024, you see about $880.5 million being earmarked out of the money that is awarded to the states. So let's get to some specific states and what the impact is. So in Illinois, for example, earmarks last year shortchanged the state $14.7 million in federal aid to improve clean water systems. Illinois has some of the greatest water needs in the country, including the second most lead pipes in the United States, a recent federal analysis shows. And over the past 2 fiscal years, another state, Pennsylvania, received about $36 million less than it would have received if lawmakers had not allowed earmarks. For Indiana, the cut totaled roughly $45 million. In Texas, the reduction exceeds $65 million. And congressional earmarks also took away critical water money from, Puerto Rico, which tends to get screwed over quite a bit by the system of government we have here, the way things work in the federal government. And this happened as Puerto Rico was still working on rebuilding after the devastation of Hurricane Fiona in 2022. Let's give you some details on that. Over the past 2 fiscal years, Puerto Rico received roughly $26.6 million less than it would have without the earmarks, and that's according to the Council of Infrastructure Financing Authorities and the data that they shared with the Washington Post. But look, the problem is exacerbated further. It is made worse by the fact that congressional earmarks really do appear to benefit wealthy communities over needier ones. In states such as Maryland, Massachusetts, and Virginia, fewer than 20% of congressional water earmarks in the 2023 fiscal year went to communities that are considered disadvantaged. Members of Congress decided where to send those dollars, not state officials, who might have directed them to areas in greater need. So I want to back up for a second and address one other problem that I see here. After the Biden administration succeeded in passing legislation that funds infrastructure projects, he made clear that the earmarks need to be allocated to needier, disadvantaged communities. But the problem is the states all define disadvantaged communities in different ways. And there really wasn't an enforcement mechanism to ensure that that money, that those resources were getting to the parts of the country they were meant for. So it's one thing to just declare that you want the money to go in a certain direction. It's something entirely different to include enforcement mechanisms to ensure that that is taking place. Because look, fact of the matter is, members of Congress are going to want to fight for their pet projects and dip into those funds as much as possible for a whole host of reasons. It might help them with re-election. It might assist their corporate donors in a project that they really want. And at the heart of this issue is the problem we're facing in this country with, again, crumbling infrastructure as it pertains to water. The fact that we have multiple parts of the country dealing with lead in their water is insane. And to see that this money is being redirected toward pet projects for federal members of Congress is also incredibly insane to me. Now, Just a few more details on this. An unpublished federal study aimed to explore whether earmarks had aligned with an executive order that Biden signed in 2021 that aims to deliver 40% of all federal benefit programs to cities and towns in greatest need. Well, showed some pretty terrible results. In total, it found that earmarks in 18 states last year failed to meet that benchmark, depriving disadvantaged communities of an estimated $79 million in water aid. And according to Eric Olson, who is a senior strategic director for health and food at the NRDC, the earmarks basically are taking the money away from low-income communities that really need the funding most to fix their drinking water and putting it into wealthier communities that are often white communities that don't need the money as much. The beneficiaries include the city of Bel Air, Texas, just outside Houston, which scored $2.4 million to replace its water lines last year. With an average household income exceeding $200,000 annually, Bel Air normally might have had to take a loan. Instead, it received a federal grant thanks to Democratic Representative Lizzie Fletcher. So this is a big problem. And I had lots of issues with the legislation that Biden pushed for. It was obviously a watered down version of the legislation he ran on. I had problems with the way that it was being marketed to the public as an incredible landmark piece of legislation that was going to help disadvantaged communities. And I just decided I'm gonna sit back and wait and see how this whole process plays out. Because when push comes to shove, if the wealthier communities are pushing for, voting for, and supporting certain projects, their congressional lawmakers are gonna fight to dip into those resources and get those special projects funded. And this also gives you a sense of why members of Congress interact with one another the way they do. So when we talk about how Democrats, for instance, are usually unwilling to fight other members of their party on various issues, it could be because they don't want to get on someone's bad side when allocating this money toward their pet projects, toward their earmarks, is a priority of theirs, something that they want to push for in order to help their chances of getting reelected. So they don't want to get on anyone's bad side. They're literally playing politics to ensure that they can dip into these funds for their own projects. And it kind of gives you a sense of why those interpersonal relationships occur the way they do, especially on the Democratic side. But I think the system needs a little bit of an overhaul. And one band-aid, I guess, in the short term would be to ensure that there is an enforcement mechanism to get this money to the communities that need it the most. Because the fact that we're literally like funneling more government resources to parts of the country where wealthy people are probably not even paying their fair share of taxes, to be quite honest with you, is ridiculous to me. But this is how the process currently works. These are the flaws in the system, and it's something that we should all know about and work hard to do something about moving forward. We gotta take a break. When we come back, John Iadarola will join me for the second hour of the show. Don't miss it.
The rest of the news media says you should not fight for positive change. If you do, you're not really a reporter or a journalist, because reporters and journalists don't care what happens. I don't agree. That's not written anywhere. That's not a law. It's just a rule that they invented so that reporters didn't actually challenge the people that are in power. Well, we don't agree with that. We think we should challenge the people in power, that actually makes you a better journalist, not a worse one.
Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. Here at TYT, we understand this. That's why we're not gonna price gouge you or use inflation as an excuse to raise our prices. A TYT membership is not your typical subscription, but basic membership is still just $4.99. So what do you get for that price? For starters, you're getting exclusive programming, unique, exclusive designs from Shop TYT, access to a members-only chat, giveaways, emojis, and so many other amazing perks. But most importantly, you're helping to make an impact. As a TYT member, you not only help us do the shows every day, but you drive real positive change in the process. In 2017, we helped to start Justice Democrats right here on TYT. That's a group that got 12 progressives elected into Congress. That's amazing, you did that. Your support also funds TYT's very own investigative reporting. Just recently, our reporters exposed the Fellowship Foundation and pressured lawmakers into boycotting that bigoted event. Isn't that amazing? We raised over $30,000 for Jackson, Mississippi, and delivered clean water to thousands of people in need. Our petitions, polls, and community of activists help keep the corruption of Washington in check. That's the impact of what just $4.99 a month from our members can do. And we're just getting started. Positive change doesn't occur overnight, but with your contribution, we can make it happen together.
I got pulled in. They told me, hey, listen, Cenk, we're insiders. We are the establishment. People in Washington tell me that they're concerned about your tone. We think that there's a better role for you, and it's not in 6 o'clock. The problem with the mainstream media is they're desperate to get access. They don't challenge the government. They don't challenge power. We're supposed to challenge the government. That's the role of the media.
Components that corrupt our politicians, I think, also corrupt mainstream media. It's really difficult for cable outlets to talk about things like income inequality, wealth inequality, when the advertisers that are funding their shows are the same corporations that want to ensure that the same system continues. People watch digital media or new media, they get a completely different message. They focus on the issues that matter or resonate more with the constituency. We need to know one thing. Is the corporate media incompetent?
Corporate media, I can't hear you. Establishment press, where are you? I can't hear you. But the media's position I am clear on. Everything is pro-war, so everything is just framed that way. In this case, I mean, war is inevitable, right? I mean, the defense contractors should get a couple more $1 trillion. You ready for the stunning results? Only 6% of people say they have a great deal of confidence in the press. Wakey, wakey, okay? Progressives don't like the media either. You know why? It's the corporate media. Corporate media sounds like a conspiracy. Wait. Who owns you? Multi-billion-dollar corporations, public corporations. Right? You have to fear corporate media because corporations own us. Yeah, that's how it works.
Join the Dragon Squad by becoming a YouTube channel member. Click the join button below or sign up on tyt.com/join to get access to fun emojis, a member-only chat, exclusive Shop TYT designs, ad-free watching, and so many other amazing perks. Plus, you get bragging rights for being part of the coolest community on the internet and help us drive real positive change in the world. The Dragon Squad awaits, so join today.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian, John Iadarola with you. John donning his dragon shirt. I like it.
Well, this is the dragon caring for the environment shirt, because I know we're going to be talking about the environment later.
Enviro dragon?
I like it.
Okay, all right, let's do it.
Let's label it on shoptyt.com.
Is that available on Shop TYT? I wasn't entirely sure. Okay, nice. Everyone check that out.
I think it was. Probably.
You know,
maybe not. Maybe it's exclusive. Maybe you better go right now.
So we have viewers who are super artistic, super talented. Sometimes they send us stuff, like they'll make us shirts or they'll make us mugs and things like that. So I wasn't sure. But anyway, check that out, shoptyt.com. All right, so I gotta be honest with you all. I was avoiding this story for weeks, and now I'm intrigued by it. So let's talk about UFOs. Or I'm sorry, not UFOs, UAPs.
Which sounds dirtier for some reason. I don't know exactly why, but yeah, let's talk about it.
It does. Okay, let's discuss. Let's do it.
If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
The House Oversight Committee held a hearing today to address unidentified aerial phenomenon, or UAPs, which were previously known as UFOs. But nonetheless, this has been an ongoing debacle, an ongoing story that I was avoiding until now. And to be quite frank, the hearing was fascinating to say the least. Before I give you the details about what the allegations are here, who testified during this hearing, and what the conclusions might be, I want to go to you first, John. As our resident science and space nerd, I feel like that's what you're known for.
Am I a space nerd? I don't know, I'm a sci-fi nerd, I suppose.
Close enough.
Sure, yeah. I don't care.
Oh, really?
I know, I do. I do and I don't at the same time. I'm sure I'm gonna be invested in all the videos. But for me, I don't expect anything to come from this.
Oh, that's good, because
and
nothing will come from it.
I'm not saying he's lying or that he's wrong or that he's telling the truth or that he's right. I don't know, but I feel deep in my bones that regardless of which it is, we're not gonna uncover anything. I am sure that there are aliens. I just don't know.
How are you sure that there are aliens?
Because there are like countless trillion galaxies, and there's too much real estate for us to have been the only time that intelligent life has developed. I'm just playing the numbers game here, like a lot of people have. But for me, like I don't necessarily believe that they're like cruising around like over the Pacific Ocean every day for years. Why? Why are they just doing laps over the Pacific Ocean?
We have footage of them, John.
That is pretty high res.
We have footage, okay.
That's pretty high res.
So let's back up. Let me give you the details about what's transpiring. If, like me, up until today, you were ignoring the story and have no idea what's going on. So apparently there are now multiple individuals who were in the military who claim that the military is essentially, the Defense Department is essentially hiding information from Congress and the general public in regard to unidentified aerial phenomenon, okay? So the three individuals who testified before the House Oversight Committee today included David Grush, who is a veteran and intelligence officer. We've also got David Fravor, who is a former Navy commander, and Ryan Graves, a retired Navy pilot. Now, all three of them said different things during the hearing, and I'm gonna do my best to summarize what their allegations are in the story. So last month, David Grush, the man that you just saw in the first video we showed you, came forward with accusations that the Defense Department has been hiding UAPs from Congress. Now, according to him, the US government, its allies, and even defense contractors have possessed both fragmented and intact UAPs for decades. Some of these UAPs are allegedly the size of football fields, according to what he claims. And Grush has even stated that non-human biologics were recovered along with some of those UAPs. Now, he's a veteran who has worked specifically with UAPs for years. From 2019 to 2021, he served as the National Reconnaissance Office's representative to the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force. I didn't even know if that task force existed until today, but it does.
It's part of the X-Files.
And between 2021 and 2022, he was the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency's, or NGA's, lead or co-lead for UAP analysis. Anyway, long story short, he seems to have experience and expertise in this area, considering what his previous job was. But there is a catch. He also says that he has not personally seen UAPs in person, okay? Rather, he's only passing on what he claims that he's seen in documents and photos, along with what he's heard from over 40 witnesses. And he also said in today's hearing that because of all of that information, he now knows the exact location of the US government's UAPs.
Then let's go. Let's stop with the hearings, just get some buses, put all the Congress people on them, ship them over to the base and knock on the front door, and let's just find out. If it's the size of a football field, then let's just see it. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
I just like.
Look, as I watched most of the hearing today. I couldn't stop listening to it. For some reason, I found it super fascinating. But what stood out to me in the testimony was really the lack of specificity, and when members of Congress ask good questions. And I'll be fair, I think members of both sides of the aisle, like they asked in some cases very specific good questions. the answer was always, I'm not at liberty to talk about this publicly, but I'll talk about it like privately, that kind of, and it's like, okay, so it left, I felt the hearing was wanting in the information that was provided to the general public.
Yeah, well, and at least for him, again, he doesn't have firsthand experience with this.
Right.
He has experience of other people, which I believe he has said are legion and credible, but we don't know who they are. I mean, theoretically they could come forward, but maybe they couldn't speak about it publicly. Again, there's just so many levels of, this whole thing feels tailor-made, not like to function for the pursuit of truth, but to function to provide conspiracy theorists who will take at face value literally everything that's said without a second thought, mainly as an intentional distraction from other things going on. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah.
Like if you're interested in like extraterrestrial life, then let's throw some more money into space exploration. Let's really juice the STEM programs for American students or something, and then we'll get out there and we can go see them on their home field. I just feel like just watching another grainy video of a shadow that some jet buzzed past. Look, either that convinced you in the 70s or it didn't, because it's no better than it was back then.
I am shocked at your response to this story.
So what am I supposed to do with this? What is anyone supposed to do with this?
You seem kind of mad about it.
No, I'm mad because just prove it. Just show us a laser gun that we couldn't possibly have made. Show us like the face of an alien that you like rolled up and like secreted out of a base or something. Just show us something definitive, or send, I don't know, get Joe Biden down to one of these places or something. If there were UAPs, you're telling us that Trump wouldn't have revealed it for clout? Like he wouldn't have posted a photo of him in front of like an alien corpse or something? Nobody has revealed this before.
Maybe the Defense Department kept all of this information under wraps, even from the president.
That is
president
possible.
Of the United States.
That is possible.
Okay, so I want to go to some of the videos from the hearing, much to the detriment of John Iadarola sitting next to me right now.
I'm fine.
But I do want to note that Grush wasn't the only person who testified. I had mentioned earlier that Ryan Graves also testified during this hearing. And he's a retired Navy pilot who stated that he himself encountered UAPs every day for at least a couple of years off the coast of the Atlantic Ocean. Let's go to part of Graves's testimony during the hearing today.
During a training mission in Warning Area Whiskey 72, 10 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, 2 F-18 Super Hornets were split by a UAP. The object, described as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere, came within 50 feet of the lead aircraft and was estimated to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter. The mission commander terminated the flight immediately and returned to base. Soon, these encounters became so frequent that aircrew would discuss the risk of UAP as part of their regular pre-flight briefs.
How do you know that these were not our aircraft?
Some of the behaviors that we saw in a working area, we would see these objects being at 0.0 Mach, that's 0 airspeed, over certain pieces of the ground. So what that means, just like a river, if you throw a bobber in, it's gonna float downstream. These objects were staying completely stationary in Category 4 hurricane winds. These same objects would then accelerate to supersonic speeds, 1.1, 1.2 Mach, and they would do so in very erratic and quick behaviors that I don't have an explanation for.
So he says that he has witnessed this firsthand. And look, I agree with you. I don't know what to make of it, right? Because obviously for me to believe, I have to see evidence, and the evidence needs to go beyond one person or a few people saying that they witnessed these things firsthand or didn't witness these things firsthand but saw documentation about them. But like, what would compel this guy to lie?
I'm not saying that he's lying.
Yeah.
He seems perfectly genuine. He says that he saw it he saw it over and over and over again, hundreds of times. I personally, on like the 18th trip, would have like taken out my iPhone and taken a high resolution photo of it or something. I feel like if you were seeing this hundreds of times, you would take a clear photo or video rather than just a shadow or just a report. But there's no reason to believe that he's lying or any of them. It's entirely possible to be telling the truth and to be wrong. it's entirely possible that it was some sort of advanced drone or some sort of Russian reconnaissance aircraft or something. Maybe not. Maybe it's a UAP. But again, what are we supposed to do with that?
So let's address that real quick, because I do think that there are many possibilities, right? So sure, it could be a UFO or UAP. There's also the fact that our government is gigantic and there are many different agencies, and there's a possibility that one agency is experimenting with something and is not communicating with other government agencies about it. And so there's a lack of communication. That lack of communication is leading to some misunderstanding or confusion about certain things that might have been cited by former members of the military. That's a possibility. During the hearing, the possibility of private tech companies experimenting with things might have led to sightings of their experiments that are difficult to explain if you're not privy to what's happening. So there are other explanations for sure. I want to be clear about that. And look, based on what I witnessed or heard during their testimony, I don't think they're lying. I don't think that these are like nefarious people who are being dishonest. I just think that they saw things that they want answers to. They want more transparency, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I think more transparency would be a good thing. And when it comes to Graves, the gentleman you just heard from, he was also asked how many UAP encounters allegedly go unreported. And I thought that his answer here was interesting. So let's take a quick look at that.
What percentage of UAP sightings, in your belief, go unreported by our pilots?
This is an approximation based off of my personal experience speaking with a number of pilots, but I would estimate we're somewhere near 5% reporting, perhaps.
So like 95% basically don't report seeing UAPs.
That's just my personal estimate.
All right, so that's what he's estimating here. And I think you're right, John. I don't think that we're gonna get any answers about any of this anytime soon. Look, I don't know if members of Congress are using this issue as a distraction. I know that they love to distract from the fact that they don't like to do their jobs and actually make people's lives better. But I think at the heart of this issue is some concern that there's a lack of transparency when it comes to certain things that members of Congress should be privy about, certain things that the general public should know about. I agree with that general statement. Do I think anything's gonna be done about this? Probably not, but we'll see.
Look, I would love if Joe Biden decided, you know what, we're gonna have radical transparency and we're gonna get to the bottom of this, and we really found out what it was, which is either UAPs or military technology. That's more likely to me, but I would love it. But again, I think for a lot of people, their interest in this is driven by, again, people want something exciting. They want something that makes reality seem understandable. They like the idea of the government covering up something huge and it finally being revealed. I think that there is a lot of different stuff that more people need to understand the government being in bed with. It does not require you to believe in the existence of UAPs. I just like our world is ringed by a lot of satellites, and there's a lot of people with cameras, and there's civilian aircraft, and still the evidence does not seem particularly good. I feel like there's a lot of people with cameras in their pockets walking around, and we don't see much better evidence than what we saw in that videos. I do believe that they exist. I don't find the evidence that's been presented yet particularly convincing.
And some of the men who testified today claim that in trying to disclose what they've experienced or witnessed, they've been threatened by colleagues. And I think there should be an investigation into that, because they shouldn't be silenced if they have concerns and they want to go public with that. We've supported whistleblowers in the past, and if they fancy themselves whistleblowers who are trying to blow the whistle on some government wrongdoing, they should be protected. So
I agree.
Yeah, so if anyone is actually threatening them, their livelihoods or their lives, that should be looked into 100%. But so far, you're right, no evidence. And I leave you with this quote or this statement from Senator Marco Rubio. He says, one of two things are true. Either A, they're telling the truth or some version of the truth, or B, we have a bunch of people with high clearances and really important jobs in our government who are nuts. Both are a problem. And I'm not accusing these people of being nuts. That said, That's something we'll look at and continue to look at seriously. In other words, we're not gonna get to the bottom of this. At least I don't think so, that's my prediction, but we'll see. For now, we're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we've got more news for you, including, I think this is a story you'll be interested in, John.
You never know.
The rising temperatures in the oceans.
Yes.
We'll be back. Bradshaw Screw 1 in our Twitch subs says, where's your comment? Oh, thank you for subscribing for 28 months. Another month of getting the truth from my favorite source, TYT. Thank you for the love.
The truth is out there.
The truth is out there. There's an update from Cody, the epilepsy dragon. Thank you for writing in with this update. So yesterday in the bonus episode, we talked about the Saudis offering Mbappe an incredibly lucrative contract, almost $1 billion. And guess what? He has decided to reject it. That's amazing. Not a lot of people with integrity out there, so I give him a lot of credit for doing that.
Crazy.
Killa says, TYT and people are forgetting the Kanye West connection with this. Supposedly, one of his representatives went to the young lady's house and told her she's in trouble if she doesn't tell the truth about her messing with the election when that was a lie. I did not know that. Thank you for giving me that info, Killa. Rest of the comment, TYT, there was even a police department videotape of the Kanye West representative talking with her at the police station. We need to see more about this. Killa, I did not know about it until you pointed me in that direction. So I promise you I'll look into that and see if there's anything additional to report on the show about it. All right, let's go to Dead to Pool 268, who says, why only does the United States have this going on, asking for a friend? I'm guessing it's about the UFO story. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, that is a good question.
I mean, people report sightings of UFOs and things like that.
Do they? I think it's only Americans.
I think that there's been a lot of research into why it tends to cluster. It, I think, is linked to movies coming out and things like that. Like, people are suggestible.
Yeah, all right, let's get back to the show. Bart, why? What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the show. Let's talk a little bit about our ever warming climate and the oceans that are being impacted by this.
Florida Keys are known for their warm waters, but now they're reaching hot tub-like conditions. A water temperature buoy at Manatee Bay in the Everglades National Park registered a high of 101 degrees Fahrenheit or 38 Celsius late Monday afternoon. It's potentially the hottest ocean temperature ever recorded.
That's right, Manatee Bay in Florida has become so warm that they're literally referring to it as hot tub levels. And the water exceeded temperatures of 100 degrees, as you saw in that video. And that's been going on for 2 days in a row now. The previous record for the hottest water was recorded in 2020 in the Persian Gulf's Kuwait Bay, where temperatures reached 99.7 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's not too shocking that water temperatures are heating up because climate change has essentially contributed to record heat waves across the globe, something we've been talking about as the summer started to heat up. It's continuing. And since mid-March, the world's oceans have been hotter than at any time since at least 1982. Let's take a look at this graphic, which shows you what we're talking about here. The blue line represents the average, but you look at 2023, which is represented by the red mark, or the red line, I should say. And you can see the warm temperatures or the rapidly heating, warming temperatures as a result of the climate emergency. And these warnings are ultimately going to lead to a catastrophe, like the collapse of ocean currents, which I didn't even know was something to be concerned about until this particular issue regarding warming, the warming ocean came into play. So according to NOAA, the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, or AMOC, could collapse at any point between now and 2095, even as early as 2025. Depending on what we do in response to the climate emergency. And so the current circulates warm and cool water around the globe. This graphic kind of demonstrates what I'm talking about here. And what would it mean if the currents were to collapse? Well, collapse would have severe impacts on the climate in the North Atlantic region and represent one of the most important tipping points as the planet's climate changes. Other tipping points, which represent irreversible shifts to the planet, include the melting of the Greenland ice sheet, the destruction of the Amazon rainforest, and the thawing of permafrost, the permafrost.
Looks like we're gonna do 4 out of 4.
So John, this is your number one issue. Like you've done, out of every show on the network, you've done the most extensive reporting on climate change.
I don't know, is it? Because I didn't make room for this on my rundown today, and you did.
Why are you telling on yourself?
Maybe you've eclipsed me for doing the most critical climate coverage. I've seen the rundowns on the main show. You've been talking about the climate a lot.
Not a big deal.
The past couple of months.
It's important.
I did plan on doing it tomorrow, but now I won't. Yeah, no, important stories, obviously. I'm glad that we got the hot tub water thing though, because a lot of really like smug lefties for the last few years have been mocking Ben Shapiro for saying that if the ocean rises, you can just sell your property. And they say, yeah, who are you gonna sell it to? Hot tub enthusiasts, obviously. They're gonna get a nice soak off the coast. So maybe can it with the criticism of Ben Shapiro and focus on his Barbie review. Yeah, it's devastating. You said you weren't familiar with the possibility of that happening. Well, that implies that you weren't at a younger age paying attention to important documentaries like The Day After Tomorrow.
No, I certainly was not.
Because that is literally a plot point from The Day After Tomorrow, that gets shut down and that changes where like the whole areas get frozen. They, I would say, overplay the effects a little bit in severity and speed, but yeah, it would be devastating for a lot of different reasons. Like it is, I don't think enough people think about why like a place like Europe is really nice and not that cold considering how northern it is. That's a good portion of the reason why. Now, theoretically, if you didn't have this, and there's a lot of different reasons why it might happen, the overall heating as well as the diluting of the ocean by fresh water from things like the Greenland ice sheet, it basically just swamps the whole thing and shuts it down. And then a lot of areas of the world might assume or resume what you would expect in terms of climate, which I think hundreds of millions of people are gonna find to be very shocking.
All right, well, luckily we have congressional lawmakers responding well and effectively to this emergency. In fact, you have congressional Republicans currently fighting pretty hard to include amendments in spending bills that would cut funding to accurately responding to the climate emergency. Let's give you the details on that. The GOP bills are currently in the House Appropriations Committee, chaired by Texas Republican Representative Kay Granger, who has received nearly $1.2 million from the oil and gas sector over the course of her career in Congress. Her second largest career campaign contributor is the oil and gas industry, and she brags on her government website that she has fought to prevent spending to combat climate change. John?
What you don't know about Kate Granger is something that she knows, which is that her descendants are the worst and she just wants them to suffer. Like, you might think that we have some sort of obligation to protect our kids and our grandkids, but she knows that they suck and we need to wipe them out. And that's why for just $1.2 million, she's willing to set fire to our future.
And her own district, which is also grappling with the climate emergency.
Oh yeah, no, they're getting wrecked right now, actually.
It's
Think about like, so
by
all
the way,
of the sites.
Sorry to interrupt you. Like earlier this week, Cenk and I shared a story with you all about how Republicans have proposed responding to the climate emergency by planting 1 trillion trees, right? So on some level, they're feeling the pressure to do something about the climate emergency, but that sweet, sweet donor money, that oil and gas money is so nice. You know, they don't want to give that up. So it's like, how do we provide the illusion of taking this emergency seriously while simultaneously fighting tooth and nail to cut resources and funding that would help us respond to the climate emergency, you know, at least on some level effectively?
Yeah, the right-wing reaction to the science of climate change has gone through multiple phases, but every single phase is just designed to like hold off change for as long as possible so they can extract as much money as possible. That's all it is. And the longer we wait, obviously the more damage it does to people in the future, but they don't care, they've never cared. Kay Granger doesn't care. The metaphor I was gonna make was, like we know all these scientists have been trying to warn us about this for literally decades. Well, what if like all of like military spies for literally decades are like, I don't know if you guys know this, but Canada is like openly talking about invading us. And every year they talk about it more.
Can you imagine?
And then you had all of these like Republican Congress people like putting into every bill, even if it has nothing to do with the military, you cannot prepare for war with Canada. You can't put a single dollar into doing anything about it. What would you think about those people if they spent generations making it so that we are as hampered as possible in dealing with the obvious Canadian threat from the north? You would consider them traitors.
Right.
And I guess you would do that because, well, that threat has a gun or whatever. Yeah, but if the threat is gonna wreck our coastlines and wreck our ability to produce food and literally kill workers in the streets, why do we care that they weren't shot? They're being killed anyway. Real estate is being wiped out. Why do we care that it wasn't bombed, that it was just flooded? Why don't we care that they are effectively being traitors to us and our future in the same exact way as they would if it was a military threat?
Yeah, I mean, look, part of the problem is, and look, I've been noticing this trend of people kind of downplaying the impact of money in politics, which I think is kind of dumb. Because really, what is dissuading members of Congress from doing what needs to be done in response to the climate emergency, right? I mean, we all see what's happening to the planet. We see the extreme weather events. We're experiencing the droughts in the West. All of this stuff is happening right now. What is dissuading members of Congress from responding to this the way they need to respond to it? Could it be the donor money?
Or honest disagreement?
But
they've looked at decades of climate science, they've rigorously studied it and talked to the experts, and they just don't find it convincing.
Right.
It could be one of those two things.
Now let's get to some of the other provisions that Republicans are trying to jam into some of these spending bills. These have been added to 4 annual government spending bills. And Joe Biden has failed to issue a climate emergency declaration, something else to keep in mind. So it's not as though this is just wrongdoing by Republicans. I think that Democrats have failed to rise to the occasion as well. However, when it comes to the provisions that Republicans are forcing into some of these spending bills. They include blocking fisheries research, requiring offshore oil and gas leases while slowing wind power leases, and also defunding global climate investments. Now, more details about those provisions. A line in one bill would bar the Biden administration from spending any money on climate change fisheries research. And this comes right after tens of thousands of dead fish washed ashore in Texas, something that I think we covered, but it was a big story. I'm sure many of you remember it. And the subcommittee that originally authored the fisheries legislation is headed by Republican Representative Hal Rogers. Let's take a look at Hal Rogers and who funds his campaigns, shall we? Representative Rogers has raised more than $500,000 from the mining industry over the course of his career and $390,000 from the oil and gas industry, but I'm sure that that did nothing to influence his lawmaking decisions here. Let me continue. Republicans are also working hard to slow the shift to clean energy. The legislation contains a provision mandating none of the funds made available by this act may be used to consider or incorporate the social cost of carbon. The bill also permanently rescinds $1.3 billion in grant funding under the Clean Air Act to mitigate the effects of air pollution.
That's not even climate change stuff. That's literally just gunk in the air killing people.
Yep.
Do their kids not breathe?
But big business might have to, avoid releasing so much pollution
that would
into
be
the
inconvenient.
environment. Yeah, that would cost money, cut into their profits a little bit. Corporate profits, our respiratory system. Corporate profits, our respiratory system. I don't know.
Republican congresspeople's kids can have asthma as a treat.
Now, lastly, the bill also prohibits, no, I've got more on that, sorry. So the Department of Interior funding bill has been spearheaded by Representative Mike Simpson, a Republican from Indiana, who has received nearly $900,000 in campaign contributions from electric utility interests during the course of his career, as well as roughly $440,000 from oil and gas industry donors. In the last few years, climate intensified wildfires have caused billions of damage in Simpson State. And I'm gonna pause for a second.
Investment.
Quite an investment. Look, the thing is, this all makes sense now because pushing for nuclear power, which is like a clean source of energy, right, has always kind of been associated with the Republican side of the aisle. And I'm like, if they're serious about that, how come they're not pushing for it? But their oil and gas donors don't want us to move over to relying on nuclear power either.
Well, theoretically, they wouldn't want to replace with literally anything.
So they're just full of crap. They don't support any response to the climate emergency.
No, not, and again, it's not even like you lefties are saying that we should take corporate profits and we should ignore that and we should focus on climate gains or environmental gains. Because again, this isn't just about the climate. This is about toxins in the water and the air and the ground and all that. This is, at a certain point, the wildfires that blanket the entire American South in like a cloud of smoke is not just a climate thing, it's an immediate problem too. But it's not really that. Because if you were to take the climate crisis seriously and the environmental crisis generally seriously, you could stimulate all sorts of economic activity. Switching over to clean renewable energy would be a big investment with potentially big returns. Becoming some sort of international leader in producing either wind turbines or solar panels or electric cars could be massive for American industry. It's not about the environment versus industry, it's about the industry they care about versus any threat to it. Like you could potentially make so many jobs and so much money off of taking all this stuff seriously.
It's all about protecting current fossil fuel companies to the detriment of humanity. Like that is literally what is happening right now. And the short-sighted nature of our congressional lawmakers, particularly the right on this particular issue, is so disheartening, so discouraging, and I think just says something negative about human nature. The inability to think about the long-term consequences of the actions these members of Congress are taking as we speak.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, we gotta take a break. When we come back, Let's lighten things up a little bit, okay? We've got some lighter stories. I do want to talk about the Lizzo story that I teased you all with in the first hour. And then how much would you be willing to spend on a literal brick wall? Ask yourself that question during the break, because we're going to talk about that when we return. Welcome back to our social break. I'm gonna read a lot of super chats right now and try to get through them as quickly as I can. Me being me 24 says, toward me specifically, people don't think you're right wing because you're conservative on some issues. The problem is you're not listening and people criticize that and then you double down. No, I am listening. I disagree. I have not been provided an argument that is persuasive enough for me to change my mind. That is what's missing in this conversation. The assumption that I'm not listening and I'm just doubling down without taking in the arguments being made on the other side is frustrating. I haven't changed my mind. That's why I am doubling down. But if someone has a persuasive argument to counter what I talk about and the arguments that I make, please tell me what those arguments are. I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to absorb them, and if they're persuasive, I will say so. Samantha Toder says, Anna haters are willing to drop money on her. Great achievement. I don't know who's dropping money on me, but that would be nice. LJ Wombology says, puritanical woke scolds are gonna be puritanical woke scolds and they're gonna woke scold. That segment would have been fine without Anna baiting them in return. Hear you loud and clear. Zeke Gonzalez says, I want to apologize to John for my sleep paralysis demon, Marjorie, bothering him and TDR on Twitter. Also, hi Anna, loving the salt, you the coolest. What is this Marjorie Green thing? What's going on?
You don't know?
I know a little bit about it, yes.
Oh, you know, she watched and then reviewed the damage report.
Do you think she watches like live?
I don't know if she watches, but she was watching either the live show or the replay because she talked about stuff that wasn't in the clips.
Wow.
She responded to like 4 different things that we talked about in a row in one tweet, including climate change. She chose a great time to say that there's no reason to believe the climate is changing, by the way.
That's amazing. Okay, I didn't know that she made references to things that you said during the live show that weren't in the final clip. Interesting, okay, all right, good to know. All right, this has been marked as unclear if it's a critical comment, but it's from Frank Rockefeller, political inquisition. No, not the comfy chair. Younger generation, indentured servants to baby boomer entitlements, self-absorbed hippie. I don't know what any of that means, but thank you for writing in.
I think it's a puzzle.
It is a little bit of a puzzle. Another comment from Frank, big government invites high stakes criminality, dump the entitlement state, man up and wise up, forget me too democracy. Oh, forget me too democracy. No, I think that the federal government allocates resources that are necessary. It's just that sometimes those resources get redirected in areas that they don't need to be redirected to. And there is waste because of public-private partnerships, but Welcome back to the show, everyone. I wanted to do a fun segment. So we've got some, I don't know how fun this next story is, but it's insane. You ready for it? Okay. So property in Georgetown, the neighborhood in DC, of course, sells for a lot, for millions in many cases. But something popped up online recently for the low price of $50,000. It's a fixer-upper, Jean, a fixer-upper in Georgetown. But there is a catch. The property isn't a home. It isn't even a plot of land someone could build a home on. It's literally just this, a brick wall. Okay, so that is a literal listing. That is a screenshot of the listing from Zillow. You can see the Zestimate there.
8 people have saved it.
Well, so look,
the Zestimate is none. I've literally never seen that before.
Look, it's identified as a plot of land that someone might not even be able to build a home on. I don't know if I buy that. I think maybe you'd be able to put a tiny home there. The point is you're paying for the plot of land.
Well, I don't know. So first of all, it says the opportunities are limitless. So try to free your mind, Anna Kasparian.
Oh, I'm very free.
It says 22 square feet.
Oh, I missed that, sorry.
So that can't include the land behind the wall. It's probably just the wall. It's probably a foot deep and 22 feet long.
Oh my God.
Now technically you're getting some vertical, height there. So it could be a thin tiny house. I don't understand how you sell a 1 foot wide plot of land. Like, I don't think it's legally just up to you to subdivide your land into whatever tiny portion you want. So how exactly are they selling just the wall?
Well, why don't we hear from Robert Morris, the real estate agent attempting to sell said wall. So the real estate agent selling the wall on behalf of its owner, Alan Berger, had this to say, quote, "It's like crumbling. What can you do with the freaking wall?" I don't know, Robert. You signed on to try to sell it. You tell me.
MAGA America thinks it's a solution to literally every problem our country has.
So the
Just ship it south.
The listing has gotten a lot of attention on social media for obvious reasons, but it's not a joke. This is real. This is a real listing. I thought maybe it might be a mistake. Maybe it is a joke, but it's far from a joke according to the wall's neighbor. Or neighbors. Records show it's been the subject of at least $1,600 in fines for infractions, which Berger denied, and an Office of Administrative Hearings case. What is going on here? I don't
understand how you can't do that. Like, you can't be like, well, I'm just gonna divide my land into a whole bunch of little strips of 18 inches wide and then sell it off. Is it some sort of, like, was the land like divided in that way 150 years ago? You said it's in DC, so theoretically it could be super old.
So the wall is attached to a home belonging to another person, a woman by the name of Daniela. This is a joke. Her name's Daniela Walls. Her name is Daniela Walls. That's her name. This has to be a joke. Anyway, so what started as a friendly relationship between Berger and Walls has unfortunately devolved. Walls says that the wall's deteriorating structural integrity directly impacts her house. Berger accused the woman of stabbing him in the back. So more info on the wall and how Berger got the wall in his possession, even though it's attached to someone else's home. So his father and a friend went into a tax auction sometime during Berger's childhood, saw a wall for sale, and his father thought, great. I could say I own property in Georgetown. Deed records show a buyer purchased the wall in the 1960s for $2.14 and later sold it to Berger's father. Whatever the wall had once been attached to was gone. Some believe it was once part of a historic hotel, but how? Yeah. It's 22 square feet. Now, after his father's death, Berger said the wall eventually landed with him. Now, until now, Berger said he wasn't interested in keeping the wall, which faces a parking lot because it reminded him of his dad's sense of humor. Plus, he enjoyed showing it off. Now, you can go there, take a girl out on a date, go walk around and say, see, I own that. Super hot.
I mean, that'll that'll clinch the whole thing.
Totally, like she'll marry you. Like you should propose right then and
Definitely. I mean, the dowry could be several bricks.
Now, after Walls moved into the conjoining home in 2019, the woman that Berger is now in a dispute with, it wasn't soon after the problems started. Like soon after that, the problems began, right? So problems began around May of 2020 when water was leaking inside her home. Walls called an engineer to assess the damage and said she learned the structural beams of her house were tied into the south side wall.
What?
The one
It's a brick wall.
You never know. You never know, John.
I don't think I will ever know, actually.
I don't think any of us will ever know, okay? But let me continue. So, by the way, that is possible. She learned the structural beams of her house were tied into the south side wall, the one she did not completely own. A lack of upkeep, she said, caused the beams to become wet, and you do not want wet beams.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
Ben Shapiro told me. So it's a house, and then there's a wall here. How many of the beams could be in that wall? It's a foot wide. How does that work?
It's not a foot wide.
The wall?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Like the wall goes this way and hits her house. The beams, there's not room for them to. She should just push the wall over, honestly. I don't think anyone would care at this point. I wanna know who owns the land behind the wall. And they said whatever it used to be connected to is gone. Sure, at one point it was connected to a building, but presumably they were part of the same thing. How did they get separated into different plots of land? And why has nobody built anything on the land behind it, which seems like perfectly good land?
Yeah, it seems like there are some details missing here, right? Like why is this wall attached to her home in someone else's possession? Like why does it belong to someone else? Like obviously something happened with the zoning, maybe they divvied up the 2 plots of land in such a way.
Can we send Schuster or something? Can we send a reporter to check this out?
Can you imagine using resources for this?
I think we wanna know.
I mean, I am curious about it.
So I feel like this is gonna be tied into like a reboot of the National Treasure series of movies or something. It's in DC, it's got history. George Washington's skull is beneath the wall or something.
So since these issues were related to part of the wall that Walls didn't own, Berger was given 2 fines totaling the $1,661. And he denies the claims of improper upkeep and feels like this was an attack against him. And eventually Walls' attorney decided, decided that like she needs to take this issue to court, made an offer. Walls would buy the wall for roughly $600, which is its tax assessed value. But Berger's like, not enough, okay? $600, not enough, I want more money. That's when I came up with $50,000 without any research, without any great thought, for better or for worse.
Yeah, it's one of those two, I think.
I love the citation there. Let's go back to that graphic. Alan Berger, wall owner. Now, Walls said she does not have a spare $50,000 to simply buy the second half of her wall, in addition to her estimated cost of $25,000 to repair it and tens of thousands of dollars to insure and maintain it. But some are actually interested in buying this because some people just like to waste money, 12 people to be exact. They asked about painting murals or posting advertisements, but Morris told them they would need to get approval from the old Georgetown board, an advisory board of architects that review projects. In response, almost all of them decided they were no longer interested except one person who asked to schedule a showing. That one potential buyer also decided though to ultimately walk away. We don't know why.
I get the idea of a showing for a house or an apartment. You want a showing for the wall, it's that wall. That's what it is.
During the pandemic, people bought homes out of town, out of state without ever seeing the homes. Like they looked at the images that were posted on the listings, but which I don't recommend anyone do.
People get desperate.
People do get desperate. The housing market is awful. I admit that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you about the wall. Like the wall is the wall. If you want to spend $50,000 on a useless wall, that's actually going to give you some problems.
Apparently, it's a bad investment. It's not NFT bad, but it's a bad investment.
It's close.
Yeah. Could someone in our audience please call the old Georgetown board, who apparently has information about the history of architecture in this area, and try to come to some sort of understanding of what's going on with the wall?
What is the craziest listing that you've seen? Like,
I mean, look, there's a subreddit that just does insane like Craigslist like listings for apartments and stuff. I've seen whole apartments that are done up to look like the interior of the spaceships in Alien. I've seen really spooky dungeons and things like that.
Of course you've seen those things.
I've seen, there was one listing, I don't think it was serious. It was for an apartment, and every picture was perfectly reasonable. It would just be some kitchen or whatever. But like with each photo you go, like in the first one, you see in the window someone's like hair poking up over the window, and each photo, it's clearer and clearer that someone in a Mike Myers costume is like standing with a knife, until in the final thing they're right in front of the camera. I don't think they ever sold that place. But that was at least a house. Like you'd be murdered inside of a bunch of walls.
It's interesting. You definitely delivered for my question.
Thank you.
I was thinking more in terms of 500 square foot studio apartment on the market for $2.5 million. Like that's the kind of stuff I come across a lot.
I once went and talked in Santa Monica. There was an apartment that was just the room above like a garage. It didn't have its own bathroom.
What?
I don't know exactly how that's supposed to work. I did not rent it, I will say.
I mean, did they at least put a bucket in the corner for the buyer?
I think you have to provide your own bucket.
Oh my God, it's amazing. Anyway, our bonus episode for our members is gonna be incredible. Don't miss it. There's a Lizzo related story that we didn't have time for the main show, but don't worry, we'll talk about it in our bonus episode for our members, tyt.com/join to become a member. We might also talk about some of the baby classes that John Idarola has attended. What has he learned? Does he feel more prepared for fatherhood? We'll discuss all of that. Again, tyt.com/join. I also want to thank our members, including Aimster, who gifted 5 TYT memberships, Independent Conversation Show gifted 1 TYT membership, and Box gifted 1 TYT membership. You guys are incredible. Thank you for supporting the show. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do what I do here, speak my mind, speak the truth, and have a great time while doing it. For our members, we'll see you in just a few minutes over at tyt.com/join. See you there.
Our audience has given us everything, so we couldn't be more connected. When we first started, people would start giving us directions and say, okay, the mics are too large, move them. Turn them into lav mics. I mean, they were incredible. And then one guy walked in and gave us a really expensive switcher and said, you guys need this, and walked out. Okay, it's amazing. They helped us build a studio. They did a $2 million funding campaign for us. And so they really are us. We do this show together to the point where some of our hosts are even former listeners. So when we say